I'm Ellie Richards and I'm an artist. I'm a sculptor and I'm a furniture maker. And I feel like I've been a maker, been a collector and a sort of thinker about materials for as long as I can remember. The basket casket piece, it was something that resulted from a body of research that I did a couple years prior. And that was an apprenticeship abroad at the Kanikwe workshop in Accra, Ghana. And that's where I learned just a sort of taste of the traditional coffin making practices that exist there. I didn't go there because I wanted to become a coffin maker. I just went there because I was so intrigued by the techniques that they were using to make such abstract forms out of wood with minimal tooling. And so that part, carried me through to making Basket Casket, which is sort of a scaled down version of using the coffin making techniques that is a hollow form that opens like a box. The tradition in Ghana for these fantasy coffins, as they're known, is sort of started in 1950s colonial Ghana, where there was a tradition or a celebration for chiefs that, they would sort of be carried along in palanquins, which are sort of sedan chairs, so sort of carrying along someone in celebration of them. And this is when that person is still alive. The story goes that there was a preparation for one of these celebrations, but the chief died before he could be carried in this elaborate chair that was made for him. And so this was a very fantastical, chair that was made for this chief, but he didn't get to, be seen in it alive. Instead, he was buried in it. And everybody was really sort of thrilled by this sort of idea of burying this very elaborate thing that was just made, and it was sort of cemented in that event that moving forward, others would sort of pursue this as well, wanting to be buried in something so elaborate and fantastical. Eric Anong, who is one of the sons of the original coffin makers, is an artist working in the States right now, and he has brought his tradition to the United States and exposed a lot of woodworkers and furniture makers and just artists in general to the practice. And so that's been a huge connection for me in pursuing, this knowledge, and Eric has been incredibly generous with it. The meaning of these fantasy coffins for me is more about storytelling and narrative, and they contain a person's essence for me. And I think that to me is really meaningful. I make boxes and containers, and I constantly am thinking about where do we place things, where do we place memories, where do we place stories, where do we place physical objects that carry those things with them. And it's sort of it's a ritualistic act to construct something specific to someone or something. As an artist who came back from Ghana after staying a month, I was only able to, really witness maybe 3 or 4 coffins start to finish. So being there for a month was I had a couple of goals to, first of all, understand what was the substructure for these, given that they were hollow forms and in wood, how did they connect all of those pieces into also compound curves, and you know, forms that could open and close. And so, and learn what type of wood they were using and how was that wood sort of milled down into the components that they could use with no power tools. And finally had an opportunity at a residency to dive deep into what this would become for me. Like, how could I amalgamate the techniques and then put them into an object? And like, that was my objective. I learned that there's very little sketching involved. Like, they don't plan these out. There's no full-scale drawings. There's no, I will say that literally they took a stick and drew into the dirt ground the cross section of like the tomato coffin that they were making, and then built up from that. So it was just a rough sketch on the ground, and they went from there. And so similarly, I did not have like a finished idea of what mine would become. I knew that it was going to be, it wasn't going to be representational. It wasn't going to be, a recognizable object. I just wanted it to be sort of a form that grew from itself, in a sense. Basically, you start with that ring on the ground, and you take pieces of wood and you piece it together one by one. So that was the other thing that was great. It was like, no matter what, you cannot speed this process up. You have to connect one piece to the piece next to it. And the way that they connect them is through a little bit of glue and some nails that you hammer in by hand. And so I really liked that dependency of the form on each of the individual parts, and that together, only when they were all together and that you had an enclosed form was it structurally stable or sound. In the end, it became something that did feel very bodily, and it was very much of the scale of a human body, but not to contain it. And so it ended up to me looking very much like a torso, and that made sense in that it was a direct reference to the coffin forms. When you look at the basket casket piece, it looks like a solid form, but actually there's a splice in it that's, halfway, and I didn't make that happen until after the whole form was built. So I took the whole form onto the bandsaw and cross-cut it in half to make it into a two-part container, because otherwise I felt like, how would you know that it was a hollow form? And the inside is not painted at all, but the outside has a sort of patchwork. It's a multicolor patchwork feel of lots of different colors of acrylic and milk paint and gold leaf, and it's sort of technicolor in a way. But on the inside, when you open it up, you can just see the blank basswood and all of the different pieces and glue, squeezing out, and it's not cleaned up at all. And that sort of, juxtaposition of something very elaborate on the outside and something very crude and unfinished on the inside, these interiors and exteriors, and the sort of facade that these coffins are, in a way, that was, my way of communicating that, to leave the inside imperfect and unfinished, and to have the outside appear as a solid whole. But then, only after having the experience of opening up and examining it would you sort of have that contrast happen. In Western woodworking, everything is so planned and precise, and this way of working was very intuitive. I had to let go of a lot of those rules that I was taught over the years about how to build something. I loved that about it, though. It was so great to have a break from an experience, just a totally different way of using the same exact material that I had spent all of these years learning how to work. And it fits more with my mode of expression, which is very intuitive. I already was using the bandsaw to, sketch out forms with no drawing. And that sort of feeling as an artist is not unique to me, but it's it's sort of one way you can go forward. There's a fine balance there, you know, like having a plan and like totally winging it. And so I think for me, the planning and everything was in the apprenticeship and like learning those techniques, and then I was able to apply them to a form that didn't really have a set direction.